And Senate Republicans failed to advance the Save America Act, a Trump-backed election bill focused on voter identification and proof of citizenship requirements.
The legislation falling short after 4 Republicans joined Democrats in opposing the measure despite calls from fellow senators about the bill's urgency.
Every country in the entire world, countries you're familiar with, countries you're not, countries as wide-ranging as Mexico, Brazil, India, Argentina, Peru, Botswana, Burundi, they all have voter ID requirements. We do not. We do not want to leave this amount of power sitting on the table so that foreign powers can send forth people who are not eligible to vote in this country and vote anyway. We need to do this. The House of Representatives has passed the Save America Act. We now have the opportunity to vote on that same bill.
The measure failing on a 48-50 vote, with 60 votes needed to pass in the Senate. Republican Senators Tom Tillis, Lisa Murkowski, Mitch McConnell, and Susan Collins joined Democrats in voting against the proposal.
The Save America Act would have required photo ID to vote and proof of citizenship to register to vote in federal elections. President Trump strongly backing the legislation.
Stay on this video because what just happened in the Senate is not just another political setback for Trump. It is a warning sign, a serious one. The GOP Senate is flipping on him again. Trump has tried again and again to push the so-called Save America Act through the system. He keeps selling it as election security. He keeps pretending this is about protecting the vote. But let's be honest about what is really happening here. This is not about saving democracy. This is about saving Trump. And once again, it failed.
Washington. President Trump is turning up the pressure on Senate Republicans to pass a major election security bill, and he wants it linked to a debate over government surveillance powers. On Capitol Hill, the Save America Act, a GOP-led election security bill, is back to top of mind, this time in the Senate.
We're talking about 3 out of 4 Americans, regardless of political party, want to make it easy to vote, hard to cheat.
The House passed the most recent version of the bill in February. It notably requires proof of citizenship to register to vote and a national voter ID requirement for federal elections.
It would wreak havoc in communities across the country as voters are kicked off voter rolls and states scramble to implement drastic change.
But the legislation has virtually no Democratic support.
All of these are actions to take away the right to vote,
meaning it can't pass the 60-vote threshold to overcome the filibuster. It's also one of President Trump's main legislative priorities, and he's pushing to nuke the filibuster to pave a path for the bill to land on his desk.
In the last 24 hours, the effort hit another wall, and Republicans are now scrambling to figure out what comes next. Trump is furious because he understands exactly what this means. The SAFE Act was not just another bill to him. It was part of a much bigger plan heading into the midterms. More ID requirements, more restrictions, more obstacles, more pressure on voters, more ways to make the election system harder to navigate, especially in places where he knows he is politically weak. That is why this failure matters. This is not happening in isolation. Trump has already seen parts of his election strategy challenged and blocked in court. His attacks on mail-in ballots have run into legal resistance. His attempts to interfere with voter data have faced serious pushback. His efforts to pressure blue states have not gone the way he wanted. And now, with this latest Senate failure, the message is getting clearer by the day. The courts are not giving him a blank check, and Senate Republicans are no longer rushing to save him at any cost. That is the real story.
We have to be able to get proof of citizenship when you vote. Otherwise, we don't have elections.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune arguing he doesn't have the votes among Republicans to abolish the filibuster, even if he wanted to.
It is a defeatist perspective to say, well, the votes aren't there, so we're not going to try.
Adding to the pressure, President Trump is also urging lawmakers to tie the Save America Act to a renewal of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA. But that strategy is running into resistance within his own party.
We continue, as we move forward, to look for those opportunities where this team can pull together, House, Senate, and President and his team in the White House on issues that are going to make this country safer and stronger and more prosperous.
While many Senate Republicans support the SAVE Act, some are wary of linking it to FISA, warning combining the two could jeopardize a surveillance program they view as a critical national security tool. President Trump is expected to discuss the Save America Act directly with Senate Republicans during a closed-door meeting on Wednesday.
Trump wants people to believe that everything will eventually land in the Supreme Court and that the court will rescue him. But that is not how the system works. The Supreme Court only takes a small number of cases. Most legal battles are decided in lower courts and appeals courts. So when Trump loses there, he cannot always count on a last-minute rescue from above. And lately, those lower courts have been a major problem for him. Even judges appointed by Republican presidents have ruled against Trump's side in major fights. That matters because it makes it harder for him to claim every loss is just a partisan attack. When judges from different political backgrounds keep reaching the same conclusion, the issue is not some grand conspiracy. The issue is the weakness of Trump's legal strategy. That is why these losses are piling up. On the other side, Democratic attorneys general and legal teams have been more disciplined. They are filing cases carefully, they are building records, they are following the law step by step. They are making sure their arguments can survive appeals. That may not look exciting on television, but it matters. The justice system can move slowly, but when a case is built properly, it becomes much harder for Trump to break it apart later.
In recent weeks, legislation has stalled in Congress over Republican efforts to pass the Save America Act. The bill does not currently have the support needed to get to President Trump's desk, but if it does become law, it could upend voting nationwide in the upcoming midterm elections. With congressional districts now set, and the Supreme Court's biggest voting-related cases in the rearview mirror, President Donald Trump is doubling down on an ambitious voting bill that would impact voters nationwide.
Because of the mail-in ballot ruling, which was a little bit surprising, gives people more time to vote illegally, let's say. But the SAVE Act is even more important. That was a ruling that was, I think it was very detrimental to honest elections.
After a divided court ruled this week that states are allowed to count mail ballots that they receive after Election Day, as long as they're postmarked no later than the day of the election, Trump has begun a renewed push for the Save America Act. The bill would require all voters nationwide to show voter ID at the ballot box, require Americans registering to vote show documents in person proving their American citizenship, and sharply limit vote by mail, requiring a limited list of excuses for not voting in person, including illness, disability, military deployment, or travel on Election Day.
Meanwhile, Trump's side keeps rushing, threatening, pressuring, and improvising. And that is not a strategy, that is panic. But the biggest blow here is not just legal. It is political. Senate Republicans are not necessarily standing up to Trump because they suddenly discovered courage. They are not doing this because they have become defenders of democracy overnight. They are doing it because they are trying to survive. Trump has put them in a brutal position. He has made this feel like a choice between saving him and saving themselves. And for once, some Republicans are looking at the situation and saying, we choose ourselves. That is what makes this moment so dangerous for him.
It would be the most restrictive voting bill that Congress has ever passed. It would do all sorts of things like require Americans to present documents like a passport or birth certificate in order to register to vote. There's 21 million Americans who don't have ready access to those documents. It would impose voter ID restrictions that are as narrow as any states in the country.
The bill has stalled in the Senate, where it does not have the support needed to pass. On the other side of the Capitol, frustrated members of the ultra-conservative House Freedom Caucus have at times protested by holding up other unrelated legislation.
I understand the frustration of my colleagues as Senate Democrats are refusing to move the Save America Act. Remember, we passed it 3 times in the House, and we intend to pass it again.
Though Republicans control both chambers of Congress, the bill still lacks the support needed to make its way to the president's desk. It remains unclear if lawmakers may seek to pass a pared-back version that could potentially garner enough support. Here on Capitol Hill, Democrats have fought against the Save America Act. Democratic congressional leadership has called it, quote, Jim Crow 2.0 over concerns it could disenfranchise voters. Democrats say they will fight to make sure it never becomes law.
These senators can see what is coming. They see the blue states, they see the money, they see voter anger, they see the possibility of a blue wave. They understand that if they attach themselves too closely to Trump's election schemes, they could lose their own seats, their donors, their power, and their careers. So now the fear is starting to shift. For years, Trump controlled the Republican Party by making every fight personal. Republicans were scared of his base. They were scared of his attacks. They were scared of being called traitors. They were scared of getting primaried. They were scared that crossing him would end their careers. But now they are asking a different question. What happens if standing with Trump is what destroyed him? That is the shift, and Trump knows it.
On this election security bill is expected to continue throughout the weekend, even though the Republican-backed measure likely does not have enough support to pass.
Requiring a photo ID to vote is just common sense. And it's not that hard.
All week on the Senate floor, Republican senators are advocating for a bill called the Save America Act, or the SAVE Act.
How long? As long as it takes. As long as it takes to get it passed.
It would require voters to show proof of U.S. citizenship, like a passport or birth certificate, when registering to vote in federal elections, and an ID to cast a ballot.
You need a photo ID to see a doctor, stay at a hotel, start a job. It's not too much to ask to require it when you go in to vote.
Republicans say it's about protecting the integrity of U.S. elections. But Democrats argue it could make it harder for millions of Americans to vote.
The SAVE Act says no more vote by mail, no more driver's licenses to register, no registering online or on campus or at church.
And unless Republicans do away with the 60-vote Senate filibuster, they're unlikely to gain enough support to get the legislation through.
If Republicans want to waste the Senate's time debating this bill, so be it.
Now, no Democrats support the SAVE Act, and even a few Republicans have voiced opposition to it.
That is why he keeps pushing harder. That is why he keeps demanding loyalty. That is why he keeps screaming for the SAFE Act, because every legal defeat, every failed bill, and every act of hesitation from Republicans makes him look weaker. The SAFE Act was supposed to be his shield. Instead, it is exposing his weakness. The courts are pushing back, the states are pushing back, and now the Senate is starting to protect itself.
Paul, I was in the makeup room when this ruling came down. I gasped. Your take on what the court decided today?
I gasped too, which is unfortunate because it's a common sense decision.
Sure.
What the court said is that when you vote on the day that you cast your ballot. The Trump administration was arguing you don't really vote until the vote gets counted. And the law in Mississippi allowed votes to get counted 5 days after Election Day, as long as they were postmarked by Election Day. What the court said today, 5-4 decision, is that the postmark is what's important.
Secretary Aguilar, we are all watching this and wondering what it means for democracy. The stakes are slightly different for you, because if this ruling had come down a different way, it would potentially change the way in which you administer your own elections in your state. Tell us what is at stake with this ruling, the relief I imagine you are feeling today.
Well, today, the voters won, not individual Secretary of States, not elections officials, but the voters, because we continue to have our elections as we intended to have our elections. It's about Nevadans deciding for Nevada what's in the best interest of our voters. And the fact that we get to run our elections like we did in 24, we get to run them like we did recently in the 26 primary, the voters can remain confident that our elections work and that we're going to continue to make them safe, secure, and accessible throughout the entire state.
This is a trifecta of destruction for Trump. He is losing ground in court, he is losing ground in Congress, and he may be losing control over the Republicans who once protected him without hesitation. That is why this moment matters so much.
Look, when you think about what Donald Trump is doing right now, when you juxtapose it with the fact that you have multiple Republican senators saying this is dead on arrival, begs the question, why keep on doing it? Why keep on calling for this? I think there's one simple answer at this point. That is, he wants to sow confusion, chaos, and distrust about the upcoming midterm elections. We've seen this show before. We all remember January 6th. This is not just words at this point. So in the face of the Supreme Court ruling, in the face of the continued calls for the SAVE Act, the question we all should be asking right now is, what are the Democrats going to do about it? Particularly, what are the Democratic governors going to do about it, who have a consolidated, concentrated number of swing congressional seats within their states: Virginia, New Jersey, New York, Michigan, California. These are where the action is. What are those governors going to do to stand up to Trump-related electoral interference?
Okay, I'm going to come back to the question that you posed about governors, because before I do, Vaughn, I want you to answer the question that Max Rose just posed, perhaps rhetorical, about why the president continues to come back to this push for a piece of legislation his own caucus is telling him is DOA.
And the reality for Donald Trump here, 4 months out from the midterm elections, Alicia, is that he and his executive branch have effectively now, by the courts, been backed into a corner. Not by the courts, but also by Congress, being unwilling to pass the SAVE Act. And that calls into question what their next line of action is.
This is not just about one failed bill. This is about power. This is about the midterms. This is about whether Trump can bend the system enough to protect himself from accountability. And it is about whether Republicans are still willing to risk their own futures to help him do it. Right now, that answer is becoming less certain. Trump wanted the SAFE Act to save himself, but instead, it may have revealed something much bigger. Even his own party understands that he is becoming a political liability. And for Trump, that may be the most dangerous development of all.